No, nothing specific. So happy to just start running through some questions.
Let's do it. Okay. So Jams in the chat first sends his regrets, won't be able to attend this evening. Was just wondering about internal team dynamics, specifically around any difference in opinion regarding the path forward, the barn raise, etc. How have those disagreements been handled? Have they brought the team closer? Questions along those lines. And he says, no wrong answers.
Well, it's actually a great question. It's funny. If anything, the thing we would have commented on prior to this when you prefaced us was how amazing it's been to watch all of the contributors to Beanstalk and Beanstalk Farms just rally together in an incredible way over the past week. And I'll just speak from my perspective. It feels like everyone is much closer and much it's just like an incredible thing to witness in terms of output, quality, and communication and organization. It's like everyone's delivering. It's really amazing. So have been just amazed and impressed, and grateful to be surrounded by so many amazing individuals.
And I would add to that, watching the chat in the different Discord channels, we actually had a separate server for a little while that's since been mothballed, and a lot of robust discussion in a lot of different places. It's been really impressive, to watch so many members of the community start to think really dynamically about how to approach this particular problem. The other thing that I've been really interested to watch as I've watched discussions happen is individuals that have had sometimes very different opinions about the right move. And I would say that I think we've seen a lot of folks that have had different paths and suggestions, many of which are viable, go through the process, make those suggestions, have good, robust discussion, but still be willing to, once the decision is made, to rally around that decision and not necessarily be sore because their solution wasn't picked, or it's not exactly what they had envisioned or hoped for. We've seen a lot of folks give input and then know that they've been listened to, but as things have progressed, been more than willing to say, oh, okay, this solution that we're working towards is viable as well, so I'm going to give it my support. So, looking through the chat next, in the Q&A chat, we've got Warthog with a couple questions. First question: Are we going to make the win unpause date vote part of the part of the barn raise snapshot vote?
So hold on, I messed up my mic. One sec.
Oh, you're good.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you just perfectly. If you want me to rephrase that, I think.
No, we're good.
You good?
So definitely think that the unpaused vote is separate from the structure of the barn raise, and so it should probably be a separate snapshot. Furthermore, the decision on when to unpause it is probably highly influenced by the amount of funds the barn raise is able to recapitalize, and so it makes sense to have that be a separate snapshot after the barn raise, in our opinion. But that's up for discussion whether that should be voted on sooner rather than later as well. But from our perspective, there's no reason to commit, and that would be it. Did you ask all three questions or just the first one, Rex? I forget.
Nope, just got the first one. If you want me to go to the second one, more than happy to, or if you want to keep going, you're more than welcome to.
No, why don't you prompt us? Didn't mean to
Sure.
get ahead of ourselves.
No problem at all. So Warhog's next question, this is a really good one. It's one that's gone through my mind as well. Are we going to be able to check our prior bean balances at some point in time before the barn raise? They would like to reconcile their balances before a possible haircut for tax purposes.
So circulating beans is a little bit harder to do, but in terms of any of the assets that were in Beanstalk prior to the attack, that shouldn't be too hard. Right now, the main problem is just that the website is failing on load, and therefore, it's you know, that once the website can run effectively or load without crashing, all of that data is still there. So it's a matter of when, but that should be available at some point. You're circulating beans and stuff because they may have been traded or sold and stuff. It's a little bit harder to restore the state there, whereas all of the beanstalk information is still stored for the most part. So there is a little bit of additional complexity there, but hopefully that clarifies it.
Yeah, I think that's fair in the understanding. I would say that I guess my expectation is, just as a user, is that that the picture of stock, seeds, pods, those assets seem like they'd be relatively easy to wrap our hands around. And to your point, circulating, I don't personally count on having any circulating balance, but that's just me. And maybe, I mean, I don't know if that's a wise thing for members of the community to approach it, a wise way for them to approach it as well. But at least that's, in my opinion, that's where I'm personally starting from. Warthog's third question was, can you speak to multisig management and specific security priorities for the benefits of everyone on the call?
Sure. This is actually one of the things that is a new problem for the DAO to solve and requires a significant amount of additional thought from everyone that's going to be involved in the process of being on the multisig wallet or involved in the multisig wallet, even if they're not a key holder. And this is something that should be weighed in on by a variety of different external sources. So Beanstalk Farms has already reached out to Ohm to inquire about the procedure around their multisig wallet. And this is something that the auditors that are working on Beanstalk will also hopefully be able to advise on best practices and such. And in short, over the next couple of weeks between now and whenever Beanstalk is restarted, the hope would be that there's formal documentation published on best practices for key holders for Beanstalk. So this is highly important from our perspective, and something that there seems to be a very high amount of focus on from people that are working on Beanstalk and via Beanstalk Farms and externally that might also be on the wallet, if that makes sense. So very high priority, and the expectation should be that there's some additional documentation coming, before Beanstalk restarts.
All right, good stuff. So next, Austin dropped a handful of questions into the chat. I'm going to read those as well as possible now. So first is these actually come from the questions channel. So Sparkle Pony via Austin asks, can the vote on the timeline for Beanstalk restart happen before the barn raise?
Well, anything is possible, right? Ultimately, it's up to the DAO to decide on that, both what the timeline on the restart should be and on what the timeline on deciding on the restart should be. And to some extent, you don't want to get like analysis paralysis where now it's like, well, what about deciding on deciding on deciding? So to some extent, I think that it makes sense for there to be some additional discussion. See, it's already starting to take place in the classroom chat channel around the pros and cons of when this should start. But ultimately, the DAO needs to decide both when to start and on the timeline for when to decide on when to start.
All right, and kind of in that same vein, though, on a slightly different topic, Sparkle Pony's second question via Austin is: will there be multiple options to vote on regarding structure of the barn raise, or is the proposed structure more or less final?
Unclear. Our understanding is that Beanstalk Farms was intending on submitting an entire proposal, and that is outlined in the barn raise or the path forward document, and that document I think has been continuously updated as the plans have changed. So our expectation would be that there will be one proposal that people can vote yay or nay on, but not 100% sure.
Fair enough. Okay. Next question is also from Jams through Austin in the questions channel. Jams back. So Jams asks, do we know how long the Halborn audit will take, or do they generally provide a timeline? And Jams caveats that by saying, hey, understand that not all audits are the same, not all code's the same, but do we have any general thoughts on what the timeline
So they quoted around 8 weeks. So they said it'll be around 8 weeks, and it may be a little bit less than that given the circumstances of Beanstalk, but it'll be around 8 weeks.
All right. Good to know. Okay. So next question I have in the chat. It's from Chai Kitty. Silo Chat actually got in and answered this question. Publius, I don't know if you can see Chai Kitty's question, and if you want me to ask it since Austin I'm sorry, not Austin, since Silo Chat already got it, or if we want to keep rolling.
Defer to you, sir.
Not the answer I was hoping for, Publius. How about it's worth it. So I will. Yeah, I'll ask it. So it's multi-part question. So they asked, are silo assets subject to the vesting schedule but not circulating beans? That's the first part of the question.
So circulating beans will also be subject to the ripening process or the vesting over time.
Okay. Okay. So as a follow-up to that, Chai Kitty asks, to prevent immediate withdrawal of circulating beans, which would be restored to some percentage of their pre-exploit quantities, would it make sense to automatically deposit all of these into the silo such that they can be placed under this vesting schedule, or the same vesting schedule, and in the meantime yield some percentage of new bean mints?
So they will be subject to the vesting schedule, but you'll also have the ability to deposit them in the silo, in which case they'll still be subject to the vesting schedule, but they'll be able to participate in bean seigniorage.
So would they, as a follow-up to that, would they participate in that seigniorage process under the percentage allocated through the vesting schedule, or under their full amount? Maybe I'm not wording that question right, but I hope you understand what I'm saying.
I don't understand. There's for both circulating and deposited assets, there's both the haircut and the vesting schedule.
Yeah. So maybe I can put it better this way. If let's say I've got 100 beans that are subject to the vesting schedule, and that vesting schedule is 100-day, 1% per day vesting.
But it's not. It's a function of the pod line, right? It's not a 1% per day. It's a function of the barn raised pod line.
Yep,
This is one of the
That's
things that's changed.
yep, that's a detail that's changed. All right. Um, I'm wondering if the same. Okay, so um, same scenario with without the 1% per day, subject to the pod length of the pod line. If my assets that are going through the vesting process, if I've got circulating beans that I choose to deposit into the silo that are subject to the vesting process, are they? Oh, whoa! My watch. Stop. Sorry, my watch decided that it wanted to talk to me. Anyway, um, so if I've got circulating beans that I put into the silo and they're subject to the vesting schedule based on length of the pod line, are those beans during the vesting period, are they earning seniorage based on their
It'll
vested
be the
value?
full BDV, the full stock. So you get
Gotcha.
the
That's
you. There's a high incentive to deposit them.
Yep. That's exactly what I was trying to ask. Perfect. Yep. That settles it in my mind. Yeah. So yeah, to your point, definitely a big advantage to deposit those. Okay. So next in the chat, Alex writes, um, so Alex says, it's great people are coming together, but we're likely in a bit of an echo chamber. What's your viewpoint on the temperature outside of the organization? Have we been seeing? How's the outside world been reacting in general to what's been going on with Beanstalk?
So, it's very hard to answer this because on the one hand, it's very exciting to see the amount of outside interest in Beanstalk, but don't want to shill it and make it seem like, there's going to be a line out the door for this thing. It's unclear. So, there's a ton of interest. The sharks are circling. Don't know how much of that gets converted into actual demand for the fundraiser or the barn raiser, but the concept is that in terms of eyes looking at Beanstalk, I think it's increased dramatically as a function of this. So hard to speculate, but it's encouraging at least that people are taking Beanstalk very seriously.
All right, so Chai Kitty has a follow up from that earlier question. So about the vesting schedule and depositing beans in the silo. Can anything be done? Can anything be done with beans in the vesting schedule? So meaning, so we were just talking about the idea of putting them into the silo. Can they be used to? Be used to sow pods? Are there other functions that those beans can be used for while they're still in the vesting schedule that would keep them inside of the protocol?
So that's actually a really great question. Um, you should be able to deposit them, but the idea that you'd be able to sow them is probably not reasonable. Uh, hadn't thought about that previously, but don't think that makes sense. And similarly, if you use them in the marketplace, well, let's say you're buying pods with vesting beans. Does the person that bought them, are they now subject to the vesting schedule? And if you own pods, then can you just sell yourself your vesting beans and then get around the vesting schedule? So don't think for the field or marketplace it'll work, but for the silo, it could work.
Yep, that's fair.
Yeah, and just kind of to touch on that a little bit more, the plan is to basically have 4 assets whitelisted in the silo at restart. And, 2 of those assets would be time lock beans, and time locked LP. The other two being normal beans and normal LP. So the plan is to allow, kind of vesting assets to be deposited into the silo.
Good stuff. All right. So next question. See a lot of chat going on in the classroom chat, which always is great. Sometimes a little hard to pick out the questions. So next one I see is from the Guilfoyle. And Publius, I know that you answered this question just a little bit below, but I think it's worth answering verbally too, because it's a good one. And I think it's something that has been talked about a little bit off and on. It's always worth repeating. If there's a new contract with a new Bean token, is there any risk in people continuing to use the old one? And is this something that we need to educate people about?
Well, it does kind of stink because you're always gonna have the token out there, and it's non-upgradable. It doesn't have pause capabilities. Like it's just out there. So the best thing to do is to just deprecate it in any of the places that might cite it. So Etherscan being the primary one, and otherwise, there's not too much you can do really.
All right. Okay. So looking through, seeing lots of stuff came in. So question from AJ Peichel. Can we get a little bit of additional clarity around if the pause or unpause is dependent on capital raised, and why, if it is?
Well, it's up to the DAO to decide what it's dependent on, right? There's a lot of different factors that go into when it might make sense for Beanstalk to restart. And the comfort with the security of Beanstalk prior to having it audited twice, which is going to be happening imminently, that's up to the DAO to decide ultimately. So whether or not to do it prior to or after the capital raise is also up to the DAO, and why that might make a difference. There's a lot of different reasons. So why people may have a preference one way or another. There's a lot of different discussion happening in the chat, and I think that's, illustrative of some of people's ideas.
All right. Next, IPO asks, do we still have engagements with Luna and Serotonin, and will they be covering the recovery story along with the barn raising? Just expand a little bit on where we're at with Luna and Serotonin.
So maybe Mod can give better color on this. Honestly, have no idea.
Yeah, there he is. Take it away.
I can answer that. We are still engaged with both. We are contracted with them till the end of the month. Luna has been more engaged with us, so the press releases that are out are through Luna. Serotonin, we're still, just like on high level, but we don't expect really much. We know that it will be done by the end of the month, so that's about it. But we're still engaged with both for that.
All right, thank you, sir.
Not
Okay.
everyone is sticking around.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's how it goes sometimes. So the I'm gonna talk about a name I'm gonna not pronounce right. The Bean DeLorean. Oh, Bean DeLorean, like Mandalorian. I get it. Maybe we call them Beando as a nickname. So Bean DeLorean asks or says, sorry if already asked and answered. Is there an update on the bonus for the barn raise? I heard there was a bonus for early submissions, but you would lose that bonus if you change the weather.
So there was a lot of discussion happening today in the Discord around the structure of the bonus and what made the most sense. And the long and the short of it is that the thought is 3% per day. Don't think that's really changed. That's been the working number for a couple days, and no one's really suggested anything different. But the main question is whether or not to have the bonus be on the, like, basically a multiplier on the weather, or whether to be added to the weather effectively. So the scale of the bonus, if that makes sense, relative to the bid, and that's the main thing that's in question. But the general structure would still be something like 21% the first day, 18% the second day, and so on for 7 days until 3%. And the only question is whether that will be, additional or multiplicative.
All right. Okay, more good chat in the classroom chat. So next question I see is from Mew Mew, and if I missed anybody in between, definitely drop something in the chat. But Mew Mew asks, outside of Luna, etc., are you in chats with any other actively managed treasuries?
So Mod was talking about Luna, the PR firm. So I think that was a little bit of a miscommunication.
Yeah, and I guess I would say, maybe we can flex on that and say just a more of a general question. Any specific conversations you want to talk about, or with any specific groups? Anything?
Again, it's very hard. Basically can't really comment, but there's lots of conversations happening. It just there's chatter, but it would almost be disingenuous to present it as like, oh, it's like, no, it's all chatter. So who knows?
Sure. Oh, and then Guilfoyle followed up on that too. All right. So, back in the chat, Warthog's next question is, do you have you set a deadline to finalize the bonus?
Well, I think the snapshot's supposed to go live. I thought it was supposed to go live today, so I don't know. Whenever that goes live, in theory, that would have all the details. But haven't been too involved with that, so don't know.
Fair enough. So the next question in the chat is from Alex, and I think it's one worth answering. And I think Publius, I'm sure you have a thought. I also have a thought. Alex asks, why don't we feel comfortable commenting? Get your thoughts first.
Well, it's really I think Warthog did a great job of responding, which is that it's speculative. So just because there's conversations happening doesn't, the conversations are effectively meaningless. So if there was something on the table that the DAO should be presented with, that would be substantively different. But at the moment, there's really just conversations happening, and conversations might, it's like, yeah, it's just not appropriate to comment at this time, I don't think. And it's not like there's anything being hidden at all. It's more, don't think it would be appropriate in the scheme of, like, we're not in the business of sharing rumors, like, oh, so and so might be in, so and so might. It's like, that's crazy. So that's not our role within the community.
Yeah, and I guess my additional thought is, based on experience outside of decentralized finance in things like business negotiation, giving some space to have conversations without public pressure is a much better place to be. And as soon as rumors start moving around, a lot of times the individuals involved, the groups or individuals suddenly feel a significant amount of pressure. And, we don't want individuals that might be considering taking part in this process. We don't want them to feel undue pressure. We want them to be able to make good decisions. So, it's just not advantageous to be too speculative. So, next question in the chat is from Millionaire, and who, again, I always appreciate it when someone apologizes in advance in case something's already been asked. But they're wondering if the team would be working towards any additional marketing methods to drive engagement for the barn raise. And maybe this is another good question for Mod.
Well,
yeah.
We'll comment first and then happy to yield to Mod. There's a lot of interest from the media. And so in particular, yesterday had an interview with the Wall Street Journal, and they're going to be covering the barn raise next week. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and following on that as well, the main thing that we want to highlight on how, like, we're gonna create the videos, we're gonna create content, around what the barn raise is. We have songs, we're gonna have it coming out as well. But the main thing is that what the marketing focuses on is on the value proposition of what this barn raise really means. So we're not like relying on any gimmicks. We're not relying on some hype or something like that that's going to make this barn raise successful. What's going to make this barn raise successful is explaining to the people and to those who's participating in the barn raise, what does it mean, how can they participate in it, and this is where all of our focus is on.
Much appreciated, Madi and Publius. And Millionaire, at the end of his question is, certainly a good observation that at times the crypto world can be known for having short attention spans, and I think that is a very fair observation. When I think about this process and what the team of core contributors is wrestling with is, understanding that that time really is of the essence for exactly the reason they describe Millionaire, but at the same time wanting to be as careful an approach as possible, maintain the intellectual honesty that we have worked towards, over these last few months, and knowing that, like, just pushing too fast without being thoughtful and careful could end up putting us in a place that we don't want to be. So there's some kind of balance, and I think that we're working pretty hard to try to achieve that balance between speed and quality. Okay, so looking down through the chat. Castle Black asks, what's the voting weight on the snapshot?
It'll be, I think it should be the same as the last one for the Halborn audit, which was from the block prior to the attack. So stock ownership prior to the attack.
All right. Next. Beanvincible is the next that I see in the chat with a question, who also has that's a cool PFP. I like that. Beanvincible, you got to tell me if that's an NFT. I would, if that's an NFT from Series, I would look into buying one of those. Beanvincible asks, do we have any type of signal as to as what we expect to see the community raise during the barn raise as opposed to outside funding?
Not at the moment. I think we'll have to wait and see until how it actually plays out for that.
Yeah, and I think Beanvincible, thinking through that, even asks a little bit later. Just is that a bit early to get that insight? And I think that's probably the right observation. It's just a little bit too early to tell, and it may be too early to tell right until it starts to happen. So, good.
No, I was just gonna say, I think until after it closes, it'll be hard to have the real data on that. And even then, right, you don't have exact data on people using new wallets and stuff like that.
Sure. Yep. Good point. So Tyler B has a question, kind of in between Beanvincible's two thoughts. And I don't know if so talked about the bonus quite a bit already. Tyler B's question is, what will the bonus look like? Any additional information or insight you want to share on the bonus?
I think we covered it before.
That's fair. All right. So Alex asks, what are your thoughts on what you might be willing to invest during the raise?
So, not sure if we're comfortable disclosing that. And furthermore, it feels almost a little bit like that would corrupt the market to say what weather we would be putting our bids in at. Although what I do feel comfortable sharing is some of the analysis we've been running to figure out what the best weather to bid is, and I don't even know if we've decided individually what we might want to do. But I think on the one hand, it's pretty compelling to try to bid with like a 0% weather on the first day and try to get in the very front of the line and lock in some sort of instant return and then have liquidity. I think that's very attractive. I think it's also attractive to try to place bids throughout the pod line at different weathers to try to dollar cost average in effectively. Have thought about just placing kind of a lump sum bid at the end, with the max weather, but think that that's probably not optimal behavior. So have been trying to just play through all those scenarios. But in terms of dollar amount, it's certainly not going to be substantive at the personal level. Just, the vast majority of our personal wealth was erased on Sunday. So don't have a lot of cash lying around, and given all of the legal bills that also seem to be piling up given what's gone on, also particularly cash poor. So I'm sure we'll do something, but it's not going to be millions of dollars, if you know what I mean. So it's not going to move the needle in any capacity, but certainly intend to participate to some extent, probably.
Very fair. All right. Be Invincible has a follow up and asks, is there any content needed from the community?
Tons, and I see J Dubs, who's a community organizer, already reached out. So, lots of stuff. Shout out, Be Invincible. Love you, Derek.
That's awesome. And J Dubs, thanks for the follow up too. All right. All right. So Warhawk has a comment, but I'm gonna read it just because I know that there's things in the works. So it works. So Warthog says the NFT and/or POAP idea recently floated by Dumpling could generate some more marketing hype for the barn raise. People love NFTs.
You know, all I can say is, definitely think there should be some NFTs for this. Have not had anything to do with it, but think there's some people working on it.
Yep, and that's exactly what I was going to say. I know that there is a group of people that are working on it. I have not checked in with them recently, but I know that they're trying to figure something out and trying to have something very much oriented to the rising of the Phoenix theme. So folks working on that as we speak. I don't think I have any more details than that other than to say that we got folks on it. All right. Next, Beanwashed, who also has a pretty cool, that's a complex winter edition NFT. So a little bit of a lump of text here. I will do my best to do it justice. So they say, we all remember the delta on the curve pool and what it meant for upcoming generalized minting. It occurred to me today that if we're relaunching on a liquidity pool based on a stable and not ETH, that perhaps this could mean the minting schedule would more closely align with the former curve pool and not the former Uniswap pool. Am I thinking about this right?
So, sort of, but would make the argument that the large delta in the curve pool was a function of the fact that Beanstalk couldn't mint fast enough because it was only minting from the Uniswap pool, so you had an excess build up. But agree that there is some economic difference there, and that should be discussed more. But at the moment, this is all in theory, and will be considered. What pool ultimately is deployed in the A parameter of the pool, for example. That's up for discussion effectively.
All right, and Beanwash just ended his question by just saying, if so, it's not insignificant and should definitely be. We should be trying to communicate it ahead of the barn raise. Okay, Be Invincible follows up with okay, so Be Invincible out of comments. Next question is from Castle Black. Is there a minimum target on the fundraise?
No. And from a theoretical perspective, feel like if there was no money raised, then that would effectively be Beanstalk restarting from scratch. And therefore, in short, if there's no money raised, that's just like restarting Beanstalk. So anything on top of that is gravy.
Very fair. Yeah, I would agree in terms of how I framed this process in my mind. It's not really a question of will the protocol itself be able to restart and function. Really, in my mind, the question is how big is the haircut going to be?
Agree.
Okay, so next in the chat, so the Black Knight asks, So they say, quick question regarding the lost funds. Understand the team is in discussions with the FBI and curious if any exchanges like Binance are aware of the exploit and if we've had any dialogue with them directly or through a third party.
So haven't been too involved in this process, but gonna reply with what Silo Chad said, which is that someone's reached out to Binance via an introduction, but still awaiting a response from them. There are several chain analysis firms hunting things down as well, but as of now, haven't. It doesn't seem like there's been direct contact with Binance, for example. But if the funds reach those exchanges, think that that at that point in time, there'd be more action to be done in theory. Whereas now, it's unclear where any of the funds are, as far as any of us know. So it's one of those, like, being in touch with Binance is one thing, but there's nothing to do as of now.
Very fair, and yeah, I think that is it's an interesting point. And Black Knight, definitely appreciate you bringing that up too, knowing that I think Binance just had a tweet about a different scenario where they did have some stolen funds that were attempted to be traded on Binance, and they ended up seizing them. So, interesting the level of involvement that Binance has taken, and certainly something worth keeping an eye on as this process continues to evolve. Warthog has the next question that I see in the chat, and it's a good one. So they say, saw the curve vote to remove the gauges. Are we planning on submitting for a new Bean 3 curve gauge as soon as possible?
Well, the short answer is yes. How soon is as soon as possible? It's unclear. Will the first poll be Bean 3 curve? That's also unclear, but the idea of proposing another gauge ASAP is high priority, or at least we would think it should be.
Very fair. So Cujo has a question that's something of a confirmation, and it kind of harkens back to what you just mentioned a minute ago. They basically ask just to confirm we could have, during the barn raise, we could have multiple bids from a single wallet address. It sounds like that's
Correct.
what you were. Yep. All right. Okay. So AJ had a follow-up, and it's basically just asking if there's anything else relevant to talk about in terms of the legal situation.
Not at the moment, but we'll obviously share whatever we know as it comes up, if you know what I mean. But really haven't heard much at the moment.
Okay. All right. Looking through the chat. So, next I see is from Not Sure. And they ask, will there be a change in the price oracle since there is no Bean ETH pool being used?
So the structure at a meta level of the oracle will not change, but the intermediary asset will change. So it probably wouldn't be Ethereum. It's likely to be 3Curve or the 4Pool or, another decentralized asset. But that would be able to trade in a stable swap pool.
So IGWT has a kind of a similar follow-up. Just asked how the price of Bean will be determined if there is no Bean ETH pool.
So, in short, let's take the Bean 3Curve pool as an example. The virtual price of Curve functions as the dollar value of 3Curve. Not Curve, 3Curve, excuse me. And so, in short, Beanstalk can, and there's some pretty complex maths that go into it. You can check out the white paper for something similar, that only related to the BDV of deposits, not exactly the USD value of it. So it's not exactly a delta B calculation, but the concept is you can derive the dollar value or the Bean denominated value of assets in a pool on Curve thanks to the virtual price.
Okay, scrolling down through, and I know we got 5 minutes to go. We're keeping up right with the list of questions in the chat, which is great. IPO asks, have we considered insurance and whether that would be possible here in the event of another exploit?
So at a protocol level, I've never really felt like insurance makes sense because Beanstalk at scale is likely to be larger than any insurance plan. However, I think that, and this is an idea that was presented to us over the past week, the idea for some sort of special deposit account or a contract that facilitates deposits but takes a portion of the Bean seniorage and allocates it towards some sort of insurance plan, that could be done at the individual level. That's very compelling. So we hope that's one of many things that is built on top of Beanstalk in the not too distant future.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I imagine there will be individuals that would seriously consider that, myself included, admittedly. All right. So next, the chat. So Romy asks if you would Eli 5 them on why participating in the barn raise would be beneficial.
Well, I'd appreciate it if you read the question, Rex, because I think
Sure.
the question is why participating in the barn race would be beneficial to them, right? It's very clear why to some people it's beneficial, but Romy's question is substantively, who why is it for an individual participant interesting to participate or to lend to Beanstalk? So there's a couple things to be said here. One, at a high level, what's interesting is based on individuals, right? And what makes sense for one person is not going to make sense for everyone. But if you had prior conviction prior to the attack that Beanstalk is legit, and there's something to be said for it, it's hopefully going to make a meaningful impact on DeFi in the near future, that this is an opportunity to lend to Beanstalk, right? And if we look at the demand for soil over the past month and a half, there's basically been no soil and it's been selling out constantly. So this is due to exigent circumstances, like a one-time thing where now there's going to be a lot of soil for a short period of time. So it's unclear why to each individual, it's very hard to say why one person may make sense for them or not, and certainly don't want to give advice on what makes sense for each person. But the concept is, if you're a supporter of Beanstalk, this is a very interesting way to accumulate some exposure to Beanstalk in the long run at a price that certainly wasn't available last week. So, not too much otherwise has changed.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification on the individual benefits. Certainly worth clarifying. So Be Invincible asks, have we considered using something like Juicebox as an initial raise platform to see what our totals look like? Then we can vote on pulling the trigger to deposit into Beans versus resetting.
Don't know what Juicebox is, but think that there's like a whole product design mission happening within Beanstalk Farms to build out a cool UX for this thing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, looks like we've gotten to the bottom of the chat, and by golly, it is 10 o'clock on the dot. Any closing thoughts, Publius, before we cut everybody loose?
No, just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming and bringing your questions. And yeah, this is things are moving fast. Can't believe it's been a week.
Indeed. All right. Well, we've got more stuff coming up. Tomorrow is the Twitter Space with Caesar, correct?
I think so.
Let me look at the events list. Yep, that's right. So that's going to be tomorrow at noon Eastern, and can feel free to use the link in the events portion of the Discord to hop onto that Twitter Space, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.